Today's show is a little bit different to what we're usually used to.
We have Susannah on our show. She is a functional medicine practitioner who works closely with children with autism.
Enjoy the show. Hi, Susannah. Hello. We've got the lovely Susannah with us today. This is slightly different to what we've previously had on the show. So take it away. Let us know. What do you do?
So I am an integrative and functional medicine practitioner. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist and a life coach. And I have my own business called InterWellness. So functional medicine is the core of it, really, and all the others kind of click in. And functional medicine is basically the medicine of why. So if we're comparing it to conventional medicine, which is what we all know and what we're used to, conventional medicine typically will maybe run some bloods if someone's not feeling right, or in the case of autism, run through a number of assessments and give the diagnosis. In functional medicine, we like to know why. Yeah. So why are those symptoms presenting? Why is that diagnosis there? What's going on under the hood, basically?
That's so interesting. So obviously we connected on social media and you are very helpful when I put certain things online with your advice. And I feel like, in the nicest possible way, it can be quite controversial because it's all kind of, as you said before, not woo-woo, like it's legit, but it's unknown to a lot of people. And I think that's why it might be controversial. So I remember once you did say to me, I don't know what form of conversation we were having, it just clicked with me. You said that you can help non-verbal children become verbal. Yeah. Take that away.
So, I mean, I think there's a sort of a range there, isn't it? I'm not expecting a non-verbal child to suddenly wake up the next day and be holding a full-blown conversation. But with the children that I work with, which about 50% of my clientele at the moment are parents that have children with autism. And a lot of them are non-verbal, some may be singular words. And by running lab tests where we're looking at gut health, we're looking at vitamin and mineral deficiencies, we're looking at their genetics, which I'll go on to in a minute, and we're also looking at toxicity. And we know children with autism typically have what's called a higher allostatic load, so that's a higher toxic load. And that can be for a number of reasons. That can be to sometimes increased exposure, and that can be all the way down to, pregnancy and in utero. We know that there's sort of toxins being found in the umbilical cord, all the way up to present day, but also are there other things that are impairing that detoxification? So when we run all of these labs and we look at the gut health as well, and we look at sort of neurotransmitters that are formed in the gut and that gut-brain axis, the allostatic load, and we try and bring balance back to the body, we notice that children are able to emotionally regulate better. They're able to pay attention and sort of be a little bit calmer, and therefore able to learn and pick up words and start to say singular words depending on where they're at and where they've come to me from.
This is music to my ears.
And it would be to a parent that has nonverbal children or very limited understanding communication. You can easily accept and say, can't you, that you will do anything for your child to progress because you want them to live as a comfortable life as possible.
Well, just a life that we are all used to, basically, where they're accepted. And whereas if I can make my daughter's life easier, I don't want to change her. No. I absolutely adore her. But if I can help her live in this fucked up world, then I will. So I'm all for it. And I've always said it to Sophie from day one. Like, obviously I'm a bit skeptical about it, but what do you actually have to lose?
Yeah, and I think, I understand sort of the pushback. And when you see sort of studies, there was a study that was published recently about 2 twin girls. I don't know if you've seen it or come across it. And the terminology that is used, I think, is sometimes where it gets parents' backs up, when we're saying sort of reverse or cure. And I think that those words need to be gone because we do know that autism has genetics there. There are genetic traits. But we also know now that environment plays a role. We know the science is very, very clear that pollution can play a role in autism. Pesticides can play a role, BPAs, which is found in plastics. And we also know that there's typically higher heavy metals in those with autism. And these are sort of top clinical studies that's called randomized controlled trials or meta-analysis or systemic reviews, where there's a whole look at all of the studies. So we know that there's this environmental interplay here. And I think the conversation should just be a little bit more open, that if we know that there's environmental factors that play a role here, if we can have a bit of control over these environmental factors, can we change that gene expression slightly and reduce those behaviours?
You are so right with the words, though, the curing.
Do you think this came from pregnancy? because obviously I have a typical child as well. I have a son that has ADHD, and I have obviously Bailey that is autistic. How does that work? If I'm pregnant, why is one going to be different to the other?
So yes, it can come from pregnancy, can come from the health of the mother, your sort of exposure. I mean, everything that the health of the mother prior to pregnancy as well is really, really important. Again, there are genetic factors in there. I've got one family that's got 4 children I'm working with on the spectrum. So we know that there's genetic things in there, genetic SNPs and genes in there. But I think the environment and also the nutritional status of the mother as well plays a huge role.
Do you think a role, this is obviously just in your opinion, do you think that maybe Bailey got the worst of it because I was pregnant through COVID?
That's hard to say.
Yeah.
I don't
Controversial
know. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that one.
Yeah. I mean, I find that fascinating. But would you say that when it comes to the pregnancy conversation, that it could be more to do with if you were suffering mentally? Or do you think it's things that you are eating, the environment that you're living in, whether I'm making it up because I obviously don't know, but whether your home has mold or whether you live in a very polluted area? Are you talking more about that side, or are you talking that it could be from like a mental health side as well?
All of it makes a difference. We know when it comes to stress or trauma that within, a few hours we can see the change in the gut microbiome. So it really has a big impact on gut health. We also know that the baby gets their mitochondria, which is like our energy within our body and our cells, from the mother. So yeah, I think it all matters. And when we look at the health of anyone, it's all of the pillars. It's the stress, it's the exposure, it's the sleep, it's the toxins, it's the diet. And that absolutely has an impact on the pregnancy and the baby.
And you truly believe, well, science I know says it, but you truly believe that if all those things are met and changed, that the child has more of a chance?
More of a chance of?
Speaking, communication.
Or having autism at all?
I think it depends on how strong the genetics are, but can we reduce the risk? Yeah, I think so.
So talk me through what I came to you and I said, hi, this is my daughter. She's nearly 4 years old. She's nonverbal. She babbles, but she has no words. She's definitely not communicative at all. Doesn't know, bless her, what day it is.
She couldn't follow a direction, could she?
She can't follow a direction. She's in her own little bubble. And I came to you. What would you suggest that I go for?
So I would have a really in-depth conversation with you first. I'd understand sort of your pregnancy, if there's anything going on in your pregnancy, how she was brought into this world, how she was fed, was she colicky, was there any infections? Because sometimes as well, children will get a diagnosis of autism, and there's actually something called PANS and PANDAS as well, which is where a child has typically an infection, usually linked to streptococcal.
She was born with an infection.
Okay.
Emergency cesarean. She was transverse.
Okay.
Within me.
So sometimes we're looking at that sort of inflammatory response. I go through a number of questions. Sometimes that initial call is anything from 15 minutes to 45 minutes where I'm trying to gather the information. Then I, from that, will decide sort of what approach is best. Now, I try and work within parents' budgets because the lab tests are expensive. And I guess it depends how much that parent has and how much they want to throw at it, because I'm the guide. I don't do the work. The parents do the work. Honestly, they're amazing. So
you don't have to actually physically be with the family and see the child?
No.
It can be all via Zoom and phone calls?
You don't meet the child?
No.
Okay.
No. So the lab test kits get sent to the parents or the clients, and then they send the samples back. I receive the results, and then we consult via Teams. So.
And I feel like the listeners would also want to know this question, and it doesn't have to be an exact, as you said, you work within budgets, but I know there'll be many people that would be interested possibly in your services. Could you give us a rough idea of how much the lab costs are in itself as a range possibly?
Yeah, so anything from £150 to sort of £400 per lab, depending on which one you run. And then my fees depend on whether someone works with me as a one-off consultation, which is possible, or a program. But with children especially, because I take it very slow and steady and staged. And typically with autism, it's complex. There's never one thing. So it needs sort of a gradual approach. A program is better. So if you wanted sort of absolutely everything, there's sort of 4 main labs that I typically run with children with autism. Definitely 2. I usually advise, but if we can get 4 in, then amazing. And that's sort of, if we're looking at the 4, it's sort of between 2,000 and 2,500, depending on.
And other than obviously the lab test results, what else do they get from you? How long are we in your care for, or how long do you work with us and our children?
So it depends, because it depends on how much comes back, but anything from 6 months to a year. And within that, you typically get sort of 4 to 6 consultations, depending on how many we need. Within every consultation, you get a written plan. So I go through everything from toxin exposures, so plastics, filtering your tap water, home fragrances, things like that, to diet, how to sneak supplements in. I work with restrictive eaters.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. That's what I was going to say, because, a lot of people have said, you need to watch her diet and make that but I can't get her to eat anything other than beige or crisp.
Which is really, really
So how do
common.
I do that?
So sometimes children with autism, and especially those that are restrictive eaters, actually have a zinc deficiency. And zinc...
Oh, that's what we spoke about,
Yes.
zinc. I remember.
Yeah. So zinc, we need zinc to get the gastric juices. It's really important for stomach acid, so it helps sort of break down those our foods and get the stomach acids flowing. But also it can change the acceptance in the palate and the acceptance of textures and flavours. So I usually go in with a zinc first and just try and get the child. And sometimes we can see a change quite quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But also continuously putting food out there, hiding foods in. So I find out their favourite foods. I'll give the parents sort of recipes for healthier chicken nuggets, if you like, and try and hide sort of eggs in pancakes and waffles, and maybe you can grate some courgette in there, but also sort of that continuous repetition. So if they do accept the pancakes or the waffles, we say the pancakes and waffles come with blueberry, and even if they're just picking that blueberry up and putting it off, they're touching the blueberry. And it does take time, and it is a lot of effort, because especially busy mums that are working, have multiple children. So we try and take gradual steps, and we look for, progress, not perfection.
Yeah, of
but
course.
It does.
So you're
work.
saying that the zinc, if we start off with the zinc, sometimes the zinc actually opens their eyes to different foods.
Yeah, it can change the palate, so it can change that acceptance of textures and tastes.
And would you recommend which supplements to take? Because, you can go on Amazon
I'm
and
taking everything.
but you've got no idea what we're
idea.
ordering. I mean, I remember I actually messaged you about the zinc, and I found one online on Amazon, a really established brand. I've worked with them. I've worked with them before, and I've used their stuff before. Yeah. But it said on there it's for children, and then when I received it, it said for an adult take 3 sprays or whatever it was. And I remember messaging you, and it was an adult. So would you recommend to people which supplements you advise and what ones are actually legitimate?
Yes. Yeah. So they get a plan with the supplements that are staged in slowly and in a very particular order, a very particular dosage, very, very safely. So we work with sort of upper tolerable limits rather than what you usually see in a multivit, which is sort of the levels that mean that you have to meet to make sure there's not disease state like rickets, for example. So yes, it's all very particular, all practitioner, high quality supplements rather than ones that you can find.
So you are getting a lot for your money.
Yeah,
really? I think you are. Like, if I'm allowed to say, I do. I think it's not like here's your
lab
results.
results. But that's what they do with the genetic testing with the NHS.
I still haven't had mine, by the way, back.
There's no point.
It's been over 2 years.
We did it. It took 10 months for it to actually arrive. It was a
years.
blood test, and all it came back with is Callie doesn't have a chromosomal abnormality. Okay, so what is it then? So it's obviously genetic.
Yeah.
But okay, thanks. That's it.
It's like when you get your diagnosis. It's like, okay, you've got autism. See you later.
Yeah,
Bye.
and that's what I find so heartbreaking. So I speak to parents every single week, and some of them are, really upset, and it's hard to hear because they've, been given this diagnosis, sent on the way, and I've got, children that are like self-harming, headbanging, pulling their hair out.
My daughter pulls her hair out.
And it's heartbreaking. I just think I wish this was more accessible, and hopefully in time it will be. Like I said to you before, it typically takes about 20 years for something to hit for the research to hit sort of mainstream medicine. But in terms of the genetics as well, the NHS will test chromosomes and particular types of genetics. We check something called SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms. So I'll say SNPs for short.
So sciencey. Yeah, say SNPs.
I'll say SNPs. So these are variants that we have that can sort of change the pathway. So if you imagine a DNA helix, we have letters that kind of go together, and it's where there's a letter change, but it can have a big impact. And I think actually we started speaking about an article that you'd shared.
Yes.
Yeah. About folinic acid,
Yes.
which is a certain type of B9, which is folic acid. If you take
And
it
do you
in
remember?
pregnancy.
Sorry to interrupt you, and obviously I won't say who, but do you remember we met your friend's friend, and she has an autistic child,
Yeah.
and she was talking to
Yeah.
us all about B vitamins. She's like,
Yeah.
"Are you giving your children B vitamins?" I was like, "No." She said, "I've done my research. You have to give your kids B, but there's no,
But this is the
there's
thing.
no whys."
And this is the thing. There's nothing like, everyone tells you do this, and you get so like flemish. You don't know what to give
You
your
get
child.
so overwhelmed by it.
You don't know what to give that. Am I giving the right? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And there's no guidance anywhere. And you kind of got to just do this on your own and hope for the best that maybe one day your child will progress.
But it's also, and this is a bit of a, probably not the best example, but it's a bit like skincare. There are so many different skincare products on the market. So I've got them all. Well, am I meant to be using them all? What order am I meant to be using them? And then when I went to the beautician, she was like, you are so overdoing it with all the stuff you're putting on your face. All you need is a vitamin C and a moisturizer. So I was like, okay. So it's the same with supplements.
Yeah.
Like we are advised, omega 369s, it's great for brain development, great for your children. So obviously, of course, I give that to my children. There's
the
so
fish
many
oil, no?
the
Like
fish
the-
oil, yeah. So it's like, but is that the right thing? So I think that's where, and again, and no disrespect to you, and it's the same with me being a life coach and with our jobs, everything costs money and not everyone can. But we need the guidance.
Yeah.
We need to support our children in the best way.
Yeah, and I think with supplements, ideally practitioner guidance is best, because you will get people on social media sort of saying, take this one thing, detox your child.
I've seen that everywhere, the
know.
spray. And I'm going to put my hands up. I did it.
You did. I saw. I was like, I saw it in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And I'm not against those products, actually. They do have a place, but they have to be done in a certain order.
But I feel like also that needs to go with maybe what the food they're eating. It all
Yes.
comes together.
It's
If you're
integrative.
just doing that,
It's not going to make a
Yeah.
difference.
it didn't make a difference.
No, and actually sometimes I have many parents that, have tried it and not done that groundwork and those foundations, first, and they've come to me and their child has sort of
Can you be doing
got
more
worse.
harm? Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what worries
Yeah.
me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because we're just left to our own devices and it's really complex.
It
And
is.
And the hardest thing is that every child is different.
They are.
So I'm getting, say Sophie's saying, you've got to take this. But hold on, Callie and Bailey are very different. We might be taking things for different reasons. And that's where you come in, because then you can tell us what we should be doing once you've got the results of what's going on inside our kids.
Yeah. And especially sort of just back to the genetics. So the reason why B vitamins get such a sort of a big amount of press, in particular in autism, is that a lot of children with autism have SNPs, the genetic variants I mentioned before, in something called methylation. And I don't know if you've seen it, MTHFR. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something that we test in the genetics.
Actually, Nick was talking about it the other day,
Yeah.
as in Jade's husband. And so did my husband. He was like, let's just get it.
Yeah.
Where do we get it from? Nick said the same. Let's just buy it.
The B vitamins or the
Yeah, with the beginning with M.
5-methylfolate. Yeah. So yes, but some children, you have to know the full genetic profile, because some children can take the methylated form of B vitamins and actually have worsened sort of behaviours, and they need more of a softer approach, because there's another SNP in there that sort of makes
That's
them
what I
a bit
mean.
more
You can be
sensitive.
doing more harm than good
Yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And actually, as much as parents can, it is diet first. Supplements do have their place, absolutely, and they are definitely used as part of my program therapeutically. But as much as we can get the nutrients from diet, which is hard these days, but as much as we possibly can, that's where we need to lean, because our body knows what to do with those nutrients from food. Rather than going
And this is the thing as well, when it comes to food, and I'd love you to talk more about it, but as you said before, when you're a busy mum and you have other children and you work and you do housework and everything else, who has time, honestly, to make their own chicken nuggets? Do you know, and I know it probably doesn't take long, and I know that obviously if you kind of like work into a routine with things, but who has time to, got Marley, my son's celiac now, so everything's gluten-free. People saying, don't buy that horrible bread, just make it yourself. Oh yeah, I've got 3 hours to make a bread that will be eaten in 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's difficult. So a lot of my autistic children as well, we do go gluten free.
Are we against microwaves?
I think if we
My
can
mum's
try.
against microwave. Really? My mum's like, get
we
rid of
try
that.
and avoid-
And air fryers, apparently.
Um,
I live on an air fryer and a microwave.
I think, we need to focus on the food that's in front of them. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in the sort of minors without focusing on the majors.
Yeah.
So I go majors first is the type of food that they're eating. But yeah, I try and lean on slow cookers as much as I can with the parents.
I love a slow cooker.
Because you can, especially working mums, you can chuck it in the
Yeah,
morning.
I did that yesterday actually, 7 till 7. It's
Amazing.
in there.
Casseroles.
Yeah. And things like if it's the pancakes and the waffles, make the mix the night before when you're doing dinner, and then you've got it ready the next morning. Lunches, a bit trickier when they're at school, but if you can sort of I work with packed lunches as well, sort of things that we can include that are quick and easy.
I just think, sorry to interrupt, I just think that if I put a pancake in front of Bailey, she'd take one look at it and throw it on the floor.
Yeah.
She'd be like, what the hell is this? Where is my crunchy cereal out of the box?
Yeah.
With no milk.
But she may also, just from my,
But then
again,
what-
everyone's
what do you
experience
do?
different.
Do you say, no, sorry, this is all you're having? Or do you give in and give them the food?
It depends on the child and the parent. I would never sort of advise,
of course.
parents to sort of
Starve
say,
your child.
Yeah. But I think, again, it's that repetition. It's, she may need some zinc there. And it's that repetition of keep offering, mirroring, sort of showing siblings and yourselves eating the food. And it does eventually click. It is a hard hog.
It's like routine based, isn't it? It's getting out of the
But
routine.
this is what
of her
you've always
having what
said,
she's
though.
Always had.
Yeah.
You've always said, you've said it, so I'm not saying you are. You've always said that maybe because it's your third child, you're more lazy and your patience is less.
Massively.
So it's also having to change you as a
100%.
person.
And I've got to get out of that.
Yeah, but it's
laziness.
difficult. But you're not lazy. It's just because we don't want to do it. I know we have to. But,
We do,
as
Bailey's
for,
different to
of
my other
course,
two,
but
and I
even
have
like
to.
lunchbox, like with Marley, he's celiac. I make him a gluten-free bread roll, a bag of crisps, a biscuit, and an orange, like done. And I know that's not great. I mean, it's fine, but it's the time with everything else that we've got.
Yeah.
So would you say, speaking about food and gut health, that is a huge impact then when it comes to neurodivergency?
Absolutely. There was a study in 2022 that showed that children with autism typically have a different composition of gut microbiome compared to neurotypical children.
I basically feel like I've had Marley's diagnosis of being autistic or ADHD because he's celiac without having the diagnosis. Yeah, because the first thing, because gut health is so big, whatever the word is, when it comes to that, I feel like that is okay, you've already got your diagnosis, and he's got such bad gut health.
Yeah. And we know with celiac as well that, you need to have the gene to develop celiac, but we know that's not the only factor. We've got about 2 to 8% of people with the celiac gene that actually go on to develop celiac.
So can I ask you about celiac then?
course.
So we all have had our blood tests, as in mum, dad, sister, because Marley's the one with the celiac. We've all come back that we're not celiac.
Yeah.
So
Further down the line?
am I going to get it? Is Josh going to get it? Is Callie going to get
Not
it?
necessarily, no.
So
I've got
could
the
it be like
celiac gene.
Oh, do you?
I have the gene, but I don't have celiac.
Oh, how do you know that?
Because I've tested my genetics.
I love that. Okay, so could my grandma be celiac, for example?
Potentially.
She's always had major stomach issues. Love her, but
But it doesn't mean that she has. This is where epigenetics comes in, and this is where I'm talking about sort of genes and then the environment turning those genes on. So if we're thinking about methylation, we can have methylation SNPs, but if we're getting enough folate, doesn't mean it's turned on. If we've got the celiac gene, doesn't mean we go on to develop celiac. We need the environmental interplay, and typically with that celiac, it's obviously exposure to gluten. But at that time of exposure to gluten, it's that intestinal dysbiosis, which basically means a disruption in the gut microbiome.
So celiac can come up any time of your life?
Yeah,
Wow.
with the gene.
I've got a question. How did you get into this?
good question.
So I've always been interested in it. It came from, I lost my dad when I was 18. He was 47.
ditto.
So
My
yeah,
dad was 55.
so yeah, and that was cancer.
Same.
Oh.
Why are you laughing? Nervous laugh.
And I always wondered why. I guess I've always been a curious person. And I like to look under the rock. And then I had 3 children water births, and 2 of them were at
wow.
home. And I started to
Wow.
realise how medicalised childbirth is. And
2 C-sections here. There you go. Answered for you.
so I just sort of, especially with hypnobirthing, with my eldest who's now 9, I started to question why more people didn't know about this and the sort of choices and rights that you have. And then I started to look at everything else that is going on in conventional medicine. And I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what it was called. And then, I found it, functional medicine, and I retrained. But I also have a neurodivergent child myself as well. So I understand the struggles. And I actually lost my brother last year as well to cancer, my younger brother. That's okay. But it makes me more determined because, aside from autism, we are living in a world of chronic disease. Our health span is really poor. We're actually now dying earlier as well, our lifespan. And we know that around 90% of these diseases are lifestyle. They're not just genetic.
So you deal with other people that don't have neurodivergent children or adults. You deal with just people that want to maybe get healthier or know what's going on.
I mean, I want to do this.
I'm the most unhealthy person you've ever met.
It's terrible.
And you won't be after working with me.
I got a croissant this morning. You're probably looking at me like, what is she putting in her body? No, I know there's no judgment.
What you preach? I know you don't preach, but I mean, do you?
Of course. I try to, but I think, I'm also sort of 80-20. I think it's hard, the environment that we live in. And also when we're thinking about toxic exposure, I'd be living in a cave with a tinfoil hat if I was trying to avoid everything. We've got to live. But I do. Especially diet. I need to work on the stress management. I'm not perfect. But I definitely prioritise my sleep, my diet, and I exercise and I try my best.
I don't sleep.
Okay.
I don't remember the last time I slept a full night. Not because of my children, just because of me.
You even went to a hotel last week and you didn't even sleep.
No, I woke up at 5 o'clock.
Oh no.
I can't sleep. And
It's
I know
a
that's
huge
all
factor
to
of
do
life,
with
isn't it?
maybe what I'm eating and the times I'm eating. And probably doesn't help that I'm having, Haagen-Dazs, cookies and cream at 10 o'clock at night in bed, things like that. And then I wake up in the middle of the night and I get this sugar rush and I have to eat at like 4 a.m.
That's mental.
Yeah.
That's because your blood sugar's plummeting because you're eating sugar too close to bed.
Yeah, see, it's all things, but
how do we know this?
Yeah, I mean that's quite self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But it's just with everything. Like I feel like it's just a minefield, all of this, and I don't know if I'm doing too much harm for my child, or I'm not doing enough for her, or if I'm giving her the best chance. Am I giving her the right things? It's just an absolute mind block, like field, and I just and it's hard for people that say don't have the money to be able to do something like that. Do they just accept and carry on? Like,
I think there's still things that they can do, definitely from that foundation perspective. So, working on sleep, working on the diet as much as they can within their means. And, but it is difficult. It is difficult and they are expensive. And I wish they were, the lab tests were more accessible. But
also, as you said before, there's, your social media page and other people's pages, which are brilliant. But then it's almost, as we said before,
because every child's different.
Yeah, but there are some foundational things in there. So diet, if we're looking at things that are not ultra-processed food, which around 70% of UK children are, their diet comes from ultra-processed food. Yeah. So if we're focusing on those foundations, then that can generally apply across the board where we're looking at foods without 10, 15 ingredients on the label. Trying to optimize sleep, trying to get outside in nature is huge for children. So all of these foundations can apply, and that's where a lot of the work is done. But supplement-wise, yes, it's tricky, and that's why I don't particularly talk about supplements that much on my page, because I don't want to be one of those people that it's like, you need to take this and this will,
but you don't know what they need to take yet,
and I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
But you also do know of companies, because we spoke about our favourite company ever, Magnesium.
Yes.
Susannah works for them, by the way.
Mighty
Kids.
I use their stuff.
Yeah,
but what I'm trying to say is that you've done your research, I've done my research, and she was in with her story on her social media. She started it in her kitchen, it's clean, pure goodness.
Yeah.
And, and obviously, as you said before, with social media influencers, there could be a new magnesium gummy on the market. I remember, I won't say the name of the brand because it's not nice to say, but it went huge. But actually, when you look at all the ingredients, there's actually no magnesium in there. It's just sugar.
Yeah. That's why the kids loved it.
Yeah, of course. But what I'm trying to say is that we do get influenced by people. And I know with my page, I'm so mindful what I share when it comes to certain things like that, because I need people to trust me back with what I'm promoting.
Yeah.
but other people obviously won't think like that. It would be
Yeah.
more of a money flow thing.
Yeah.
So it's just finding the right things for our
I think
children
that
and
all-
ourselves.
That all comes down to probably having those tests done first.
It does make a huge difference. And there's so many like aha moments when a child comes to me and I
That
can
makes sense.
it makes sense and I can sort of see maybe what I can kind of predict maybe what's going to come back on the lab. Sometimes I'm throwing a curveball, but I can see that, you know, when we go back to gut health, I can see that what's called intestinal dysbiosis, which is a disruption of the gut microbiome where there's maybe a few more opportunistic or pathogenic bacteria compared to those really beneficial ones. I usually see low lactobacillus, which is a microbe that comes typically from dairy, but that also helps. It's a building blocks for neurotransmitters like GABA, which is your calming neurotransmitter. Children with autism typically have sort of higher glutamate, which is that excitatory neurotransmitter.
Hyperactive,
Wanting the red cup, not the yellow cup, stubborn. And then we've got GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter, which can kind of rationalize our thoughts.
Have you ever put, say, a 5-year-old autistic child next to, say, a 5-year-old typical child
with their results.
With their results, have you seen?
No. But we know in the research that there's the
that would be
research is
interesting
showing.
to see like what difference comes back.
Yeah, because I think, well, I do have, obviously, I have children with autism and I have children with ADHD, and obviously I've lab tested all of my children. So maybe I should sort of compare and contrast. But we know in the research that children with autism have this disruption of the gut microbiome, and that's compared to neurotypical children.
But why? Why do they have that?
Well, we've just said maybe the pregnancy.
Yeah.
I know, but why?
It's never one thing. No. Antibiotics, toxins, stress, mother's health, environmental pollutants, you know, we know heavy metals.
But it's almost like what you're saying, and if I'm wrong, sorry, but almost
You've
like...
got to be lucky.
No, but the way that their gut health is resulting in them having a different wired brain.
It plays a role. There's other things that play a role as well. It's not just gut health, but that is, before when I said there's 2 labs I definitely run, that is one of them, because it does make a big difference. We know that we've got this vagus nerve that runs between our gut and our brain, and 80 to 90% of the communication actually goes from gut to brain rather than brain to gut.
So if you sort the gut out, then
Got
hopefully
you.
that
So
sorts
it's
the brain out.
Right. So
to a degree.
And
Yes,
obviously
of course.
I know that every child is different, and I know you can't tell us exactly because, as I just said, but despite the gluten-free, like that's one of the main things that you do to sort gut health. Supplements, i.e. zinc, as you said, because that breaks down the food in the tummy. What else?
It depends what comes back. In particular for gut health, sometimes we'll find parasitic infection.
Yeah.
So we're looking at these grinding teeth, children that are really sort of irritable, emotional dysregulation, which can be other things as well. But yeah, I've had a few parasites come back on the lab tests.
And what do you do with that?
So it depends on the child, how old they are and where they're at, but we will typically, and this is not, I'm not saying parents go out and do this, please, because you have to be really under the guidance of a practitioner, but we'll use antimicrobials very, very safely. So things like wormwood, garlic, they're antiparasitic. So very safely, very carefully.
These parasites, they from things like this, they can be removed from the body.
Yes.
And that how?
Well,
not with, but like how do they come out?
The bottom.
Yes.
Do they?
Yeah. So you've got to make sure the child is well hydrated, opening the bowels, which is a big problem in autism.
Oh, yeah.
Because hydration, but also constipation. You have a lot of children with, you know, this sort of intestinal dysbiosis, but the bloating, and we can see that there's an increase in these behaviours when there is sort of constipation or this sort of gut upset.
And you can do all this without seeing the child.
Yes.
Wow.
So with Marley, he's incredibly bloated all the time. Obviously, we know he's celiac. But so many people said to me, because I obviously put it on my social media, you wait, the second you get him on a gluten-free diet, his hyperactivity, his behaviours, they're going to change. He's going to be way more placid.
We're still waiting, aren't we?
How long are we waiting now? There's been no change. The only change, if I'm really honest with you, is going back to Mighty Kids, the magnesium. It obviously can reduce hyperactivity. But I read one statement, what do you call it, on the
review,
review on Google, to say that magnesium can stunt your growth. So obviously I took Marley off the magnesium because his growth is already stunted from being celiac. I spoke with Rachel, I spoke with Mighty Kids, and they confirmed that he won't get his growth won't stunt. He takes the magnesium. That's the only thing that reduces his
That's
hyperactivity.
so triggering. Wrong advice out there.
Totally.
Because people might not be taking it because they're worried for that reason. And that's why it's so vital that you speak to professionals if you can over
No,
stuff
of course.
like this. So tell me some, not success stories, but like tell me if you're allowed to speak about any of your clients. Like tell me what's happened since one of your clients has maybe gone through the process from...
So I obviously have a range, and I have one 5-year-old boy. I've asked parents' permission for this, but it's anonymous, obviously. And I'll just get my little notepad out because I wrote it down on our final consultation, which was actually this week.
And how long had you been working with him for?
I think it was from sort of July time.
Okay.
So this is the final consultation. So non-verbal, this little boy. He's now saying words and guiding daddy's hand into the kitchen to say food or eat. He's interested in things, which is a huge thing with children with autism. He was able to go to the dentist and sit on the chair and open his mouth. He had a sleepover with his uncle, and they were able to actually stay the night somewhere new without him being too dysregulated. He was able to play with his 2-year-old cousin very gently, understanding that he was a 2-year-old, whereas before he may have been a little bit rough, obviously not meaning to be. He's reduced his stimming, he's reduced his head banging, he's more emotionally regulated, having less meltdowns, his eye contact is improved, his communication is improved, his concentration and focus improved. He now has a favourite book, and he gets the book, it's Tiger Who Came to Tea, and will take it to his dad to say, read it, although they do wish he had a different book. His acceptance of foods, which I must say, this parent in particular, all my parents are amazing, but this parent in particular has been so on it with the food, and they've done amazing. And he's got a relationship with his older brother, which I just found lovely. And school have said as well, we've noticed a huge change. So that's a 5-year-old boy.
With his food, sorry to interrupt, I'm just interested. Was he very restricted with his foods?
Do you know what? He wasn't too bad when they first came to me, but there was definitely some changes to be made. The parents had kind of been on it before they've got, which is often the case actually. A parent, not all the time, but I'd probably say about 60% of the time, the parents come to me and they've already done a lot of these things, and they're like, there's still something maybe missing that they want to optimise, and that's where the labs come in. So it wasn't too bad, but he was definitely sort of fussy, and now he's accepting more things. A lot of eggs, he's getting fatty fish, which is really important. We're talking about the omega-3s. Eggs have something called choline in there, which is really important for learning and attention and brain health. As much as B vitamins when we talk about folate. So definitely adding the foods in rather than taking away in this case has made a big difference.
I just find it so fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
Like, I would never have known that you need eggs because of this reason, and only since Bailey's being autistic, I've had to really like dig into what foods actually have the goodness in them. Whereas I eat an egg because I like an egg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to be controversial now. It's always me, isn't it? And there may not be an answer, there may be an answer. When I hear, not just from you, just in general, like success stories and we changed this and now this happens and now he's got 10 words rather than 0 words. How do you know, without the intervention that has been put in place, like the diets and the supplements and everything, that he wasn't just going to get there on his own anyway?
We don't.
Yeah.
Because we're not sort of, in science terms, comparing it to... not doing it. It's not a trial.
Yeah.
However, if I can maybe talk about another one of my clients who's an 11-year-old boy. So a number of the family members of my clients, so mum, dad, and 2 of the sons, really lovely family. And this 11-year-old boy is in a specialist school, and he is autistic, PDA, and he has not managed more than half a morning in school for the last 5 years, and mum has had to pick him up because he's been banging his head against the wall, etc. And I started working with him in October, and before Christmas he managed his first full 2 weeks in school, and he's now in full time in school, and he had his first play date in 5 years.
Fantastic.
And what did you do for that?
So this particular client had intestinal dysbiosis, that's disruption in the gut microbiome, but also had what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. So I think I mentioned mitochondria before. They're basically like our batteries of our cells, and when we eat foods, it's sort of turned into energy. And children with autism, we do know from the research, typically have, I don't like the word dysfunction because it sounds like something's really wrong, but that mitochondrial sort of wheel isn't working as it should. And he was really, really fatigued. He wasn't sleeping, so he was going to bed at midnight. He's now going to bed at 8:30 and sleeping through.
Brilliant.
So that made a big difference there, because sometimes it's the foundations. Like I said before, I can't go in with the supplements if sleep isn't
And
right.
it's just a knock-on effect, isn't it? If you sort one thing out, that might help sort that out, and that out, sort of thing.
He also had constipation that stopped, so that would be exacerbating behaviours. So it was a targeted approach, and we're still working together. We've not finished, but she said, he's been singing in the shower on the way to school.
Stop.
Sweet.
So yeah, it's. I think in that case, that's been a very quick change, and the amount of children, and I'm not the only one in the field, there's other practitioners out there that have similar results. And I think, to me, when you understand the anatomy, the physiology, it makes sense.
It totally makes sense anyway. Just I know that people would have that mindset, so you kind of just sum that up
Is that right?
Yeah. So would you advise, and this is just, I'm just going more personal to Callie just because I just want the advice. Sorry. We're a gluten-free home now. We've changed our toasters, we've changed our air fryers, we've changed everything because we have to be so mindful and careful with Marley. She didn't come back with a celiac result that she is. But do you think I should change her meal plan at school to a gluten-free diet? Because that's where she's eating not only pizza but pasta at the same time, and a slice of bread. And I'm saying to the one-to-one, please, could you stop giving her all of this? But anyway, I know obviously you don't know Callie and you don't know her anatomy, but would you recommend it?
I think it depends what you're replacing it for, because a lot of the gluten-free products are still ultra-processed foods.
I know.
And a lot of them have these sort of stabilizers and emulsifiers in. So it depends what you're switching it out for. Gluten is problematic. And not everyone, I think, has an issue. Not all of my children, I go gluten-free straight away. It depends. But typically, because of that dysbiosis, that disruption of the gut microbiome, we know that gluten, the way that it's farmed and the sort of particles and the molecules are a lot larger, they're quite high in pesticides. And if someone has got that sort of disruption of the gut microbiome and what's called intestinal hyperpermeability, which is also known as leaky gut, but I hate the term leaky gut.
Leaky gut. Yeah, do you know what? Marley had to get tested for that in his first year of life. And they named it leaky gut, which sounds dreadful.
It sounds awful.
Yeah.
So, the name is intestinal hyperpermeability. We know that gluten can exacerbate that just because it's harder to digest, and it kind of opens up those tight junctions, which is what leaky gut is, that little bit more. So I think it depends on the child, and it depends on what you're swapping it for.
But if it was just like a free from gluten-free pasta...
Well, again, it depends on the pasta.
What am I meant to be giving my children?
I think it depends on the pasta.
Sometimes it's not as good, is it? Sometimes it's just as bad.
Yeah.
If you don't need to go gluten-free with some things, then sometimes it's not worth it if it's the same.
Really, just avoid any gluten
or
gluten-free products. Just rice.
I think there's some great breads. There's Good Grain is one. There's another brand which is a small brand called Knife and Fork, which you can buy bread from directly, that don't have Good Grain you can get from Ocado. Am I allowed to mention names?
Yeah.
People want to know.
Yeah. So they're typically breads that I would recommend that aren't full of all the nasties.
Okay.
And then in terms of pasta, there's Free with 3 E's, and that's they've got a brown rice fusilli. Now, it's not as nice as gluten pasta, as we know, but my husband's also celiac, so
can you just send me your shopping list, please? You think I'm joking? I'm not. It's so expensive though as well. That's another thing. Like
Marley Tense known as up to gluten-free pasta.
Marley just
you said it was sticky.
Oh yes, when we FaceTime you, it was sticky. He had it yesterday, no problem. That's children for you, isn't it? Have it one day but not the other.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So yeah.
It's been really, really interesting.
It's so interesting.
So, yeah, I know.
I've got so many questions.
Yeah,
still.
I'm sure. And I'm sure you'll be booking immediately. Yes. I actually want to book myself. I'd love to.
I need to get my child sorted first, and then maybe I'll sort myself.
Yeah. No. But I think it was really interesting. I think it's opened up a lot of... it's an eye-opener, especially for parents that are struggling and just want to do absolutely everything they can. But even without, if people can't financially afford your services, with what you've just said, there's so many foundations that they can start with an intervention just to see if there's any differences or whether they're helping. So thank you so much for coming on and giving the advice.
Thank you
really
so
interesting.
much.
Thank you.